did. Um, so I'm Helen Charlepsky. I've been on the school committee for 33 years, and I think experience matters. I'm not going to tell you things that you can find on my website, Charlepsky for School Committee, because you can read those. I thought I'd just tell you a few pieces of information that you wouldn't know there, like for the fact that I'm an immigrant.
Mm.
I'm
We
sorry,
are we are
it's
keeping it to
cruel.
the 30s.
I can just
It
say
is
one thing.
undeniably cruel.
Should,
It's an unusual
I'm the
punishment.
first in my family to go to college.
Okay, thank you. Val.
I'm gonna be very fast. My name is Val Frias. I am just finishing my first term on the school committee. I've been a lawyer for 20 years and have run large nonprofits. I was a leader at Driscoll School, and I now have two ninth graders. I look forward to the questions and thank you for hosting.
Wow, with
you have 10
11
more
seconds.
seconds.
Yeah. Great. Akiva.
Hi, I'm Akiva Leibowitz, father of four, and the impetus for me to run for school committee is the observation over the past 2 years, and even more so the past 4 months into the Trump administration, is that our essential liberties are in danger. That includes looming threat to our educators' autonomy, attempts to limit freedom of speech, and control our educational system. I envision an educational system which encourages critical inquiry, promotes inclusivity. I'm here to not to set the policy agenda, but rather work with all the stakeholders on developing what is the right fit for this community.
Sorry, this is absolutely brutal. 30
Oh,
seconds.
I'm done.
Good. Oh, good. Donna.
Okay, my name is Donna Perry. I've been a PSB parent for 13 years. I've been super involved in the schools for over a decade. I volunteered for PTOs, been a special ed liaison, served on a principal search committee. I've also worked on important district issues like COVID reopening, strengthening site councils, evidence-based literacy instruction, and more. If elected, I will work to fully activate the school committee's role as a proactive, decisive, and accountable leadership body. You can read about my background and priorities at donnaforbrookline.com.
On the nose. Wow.
I might change this to the beep.
I'm not
in the
speaking
next
over the
time.
music.
Okay. I might change this to the beep after this, but let's
Okay.
see.
Okay. Excuse me. My name is Bob Weintraub. I lived in the Brookline Public Schools for 23 years. When I lived in the Brookline Public Schools, people who were hired came here, felt honored, and they remained here. I worked mainly for two superintendents during those 23 years. When I was working in the Brookline Public Schools, we had 100 applicants for an English position. We had 75 applicants for a principal's position. I want to bring that kind of credibility back to this system.
Right on the nose again. Great. And candidates, I would remind you, you can see the timing up in the right-hand corner of the screen if you want to pace yourselves. Okay, now we get to the deeper questions, even though we're still only giving you 2 minutes to answer each one. Here is the superintendent question. Brookline superintendent has just resigned after a mere 4 years in the job and a recent spate of issues concerning budgetary and administrative mismanagement. This is a two-part question. First, one of the most important roles of the school committee is the hiring and evaluating of the superintendent. In that context, what are the most important lessons to draw from this resignation? And second, if you were to hire a superintendent tomorrow, what would be the 3 most important qualities, skills, or experiences that you would look for? Okay, Val goes first. And again, it's what are the important lessons and what are the 3 things you would look for? Val.
Thank you. So I think that we need to really look to how we transition, and we need to move forward and look ahead to that hiring process. So in looking ahead, I think that's, we learn what we need in Brookline, what we're looking for in Brookline, and how to engage the community in a collaborative process. We have an interim to hire first in the near term, and we haven't met yet as a school committee. So we're going to meet on Thursday to discuss looking forward. And then, sorry, the second part was 3 most important.
3 most important qualities, skills, or experiences that you would look for.
So experience is the first. I think that we certainly need to have a superintendent who has superintendent experience in coming into Brookline. I think that that's critical for us to look to. We need to have someone who can communicate with the school committee and with the community, also critical, and someone who has a vision for academic excellence in the district.
So you have another 50 seconds. Do you want to add anything about the superintendent?
I actually think I will leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, great. Next, Akiva.
So one of the key to success in this realm is establishing a trustful environment, eliminating adversarial relationships, which I believe have been prevailing. So, I mean, everyone in this call should ask themselves if they would want a job under these conditions with heightened scrutiny and lack of generosity. And after we give ourselves such an answer, a genuine answer, we should ask, how can we establish a framework which we would want to work in such a situation? So do we want a framework of blame and reward, or are we striving to establish an environment which we are working together towards shared goals, graciously, with clear boundaries? So, I mean, this morning's news about Dr. Gilroy's resignation saddened me. And whatever criticisms might be there, such a departure reflects poorly on our ability to provide conditions permitting the superintendents to thrive and desire to belong. Lastly, I'm also concerned that some of the motivation behind the pressure on Dr. Gilroy was politically driven. It's a result of misalignment with agendas of certain powerful and vocal groups. And we see how these pressures are affecting the higher education, and I'm concerned with replicating this pattern towards our K-12 schools. So it's important to recognize and acknowledge this and protect our leadership, our educational leadership from pressures, and avoid propagating these patterns. This personnel replacement will not solve these issues without embracing a completely different culture. So what I would look for in a superintendent is, as was said before, experience. I would like an independent thinker and someone who is willing to engage with all stakeholders, but at the same time maintain independence and be able to stand on his principles, or their principles. So those are the three top things I would be looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me remind you of the prompt. It's what are the main lessons to be drawn, and what are the three main things you would look for? Donna.
So I'm going to actually, if it's okay, respond in the reverse order. I'm going to start with, I think the three most important things that I would be looking for. Definitely, like Val said, a superintendent with experience in a large district. We have more than 7,000 students. We have a budget that's over $140 million. The last couple of permanent superintendent hires lacked that specific type of experience. I would look for an educational leader that is vision-based, that incorporates high standards and academic excellence into their vision for all students. And somebody who I think has a proven track record for communication and collaboration with the school committee, as well as their direct reports and beyond. I think the lessons we've learned are that maybe we aren't necessarily making the right hires. So I would want to look at, I assume the school committee will look carefully at the job description that we're putting out, the hiring process, and maybe consider that if we are reduced to one candidate for finalists, that's considered a failed search. And also that we really have an understanding of what our building-based issues are, so that we can communicate clearly and effectively to any candidates and set them up for success.
You have another 25 seconds. Is there anything you want to add?
I'm good. Thanks,
Okay.
Carrie.
Bob.
Yeah, thank you. One of the reasons I'm running for school committee is that I am deeply concerned about the revolving door of leadership in this community. And so today is a rather inauspicious day in terms of that theme. So the superintendent has resigned, and I think we've had 7 superintendents in 11 years. We've had 5 human resource directors in 5 years, teaching and learning deputy superintendents, I think 5 and 7 or 8 years. It's a catastrophe that the instability of leadership in this system, and it has to be corrected. So I think that we will have an opportunity to hire a new superintendent, which is an important responsibility that we have. And I go back to Superintendent of Schools James Walsh. I worked with him for 13 years in Brookline. And in his first speech to the community, to all of the faculty and staff and leadership of the system, he said, I have 3 goals for you. First goal, work well with people. Second goal, work well with people. You can guess the third goal, work well with people. One of the faculty members raises it. What's your fourth goal? It's also work well with people. One of the things that Jim Walsh did, and he was brilliant, a brilliant superintendent, is that personally, I was the head of the high school. He would call me at 5:30 in the afternoon and say, how you doing? What do you need? What can I do for you? And then later in his tenure, he would actually drive down to the high school on the way to the gym. And he'd come jumping into my office and sit down on one of the comfortable upholstered chairs and say, how you doing? And so the kind of leadership is about relationships. Even more so than being an expert in curriculum and instruction and all of the details of being a leader of a school system. And so what I would I would look for someone who's
That's the timer.
That's it.
Wait, finish the sentence.
Yeah.
Someone who.
That's it.
Well, that
what's
was the
end of
timer. Maybe I'll
sentence?
go. You guys finish your sentence.
Let me finish my sentence. I would look for somebody who has a history of outstanding relationships in an organization or more than one organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Helen.
So I think there's 2 things we need to do. We need to examine the causes of our superintendent revolving door. And this is not just for this time. We've had it now, as Bob mentioned, mostly 2 that were longer term, both with our choices, who we're picking, and the community support, and what we can do to make Brookline a welcoming place while maintaining high expectations. One thing is for sure, we cannot hire a superintendent who hasn't had experience. This is number 1 on your qualities, who hasn't had experience both as a superintendent, but also as a superintendent in a similar community. Big communities don't matter. It's more if it's a similar community to Brookline. And the last 2 superintendents that we hired that stayed for 4 or 5 years, neither of them had been superintendents before. And that's a problem. Brookline is not a place for a rookie. We need to look forward and examine how Brookline looks to potential candidates, because they are looking at us just as much as we are looking at them. Superintendents have options today. There are a lot of openings, and they talk to one another. They want to see a supportive school committee and a supportive community. And if we want somebody who's good, we really need to show that. Yet we rarely get superintendents from outside of Massachusetts. There's a reason for that. It doesn't pay. We pay less here in Massachusetts than New York or any of the other states around us, but we do have a great retirement. So people who are here in the retirement system tend to stay in Massachusetts. These are all things that I've learned as I've done searches for school committee, for superintendents. We don't always get a big pool. And I think when superintendents look and see, our papers.
Oops, wait, hang on. Oh, finish the sentence, Helen. What?
Read our papers, and they know what's going on. We're not hidden.
Got it. Great. Okay, to the de-leveling question. So the de-leveling that Tal mentioned last year, the de-leveling of 9th grade English, is now considered by the Brookline High School administration as paused, but not abandoned. The current Brookline High School syllabus offers 3 choices for 9th grade English, but it still gives a much more exciting description of the mixed level version of 9th grade English relative to the other 2 options. And 8th grade students are heavily encouraged to choose the mixed level option. The administration has said that the hope is that, quote, students will vote with their feet, and the leveled options could eventually be dropped due to lack of interest. In parallel, WISP, that's WHISP, the 9th grade social studies class, has been de-leveled since 2019 with no review, and despite some jarring testimonies from students about its, quote, lameness. What are your views on this topic, and what would you do about it as a school committee member? Akiva.
So I think it's important to keep in mind, in order to be able to give a nuanced answer to this question, keep in mind several principles. One is public education is the fine balance between the ability to provide widespread free education, equitable education to all, and balance that with ability to personalize and provide specific educational needs to every particular student. And there's always going to be that inherent tension. And I think it's important to see this question through this prism. And always ask the question: How are we where are we on this balance? Um, and the other thing is we need to think what our goals are with deleveling. I think that's been sort of the goals of deleveling have been forgotten, dropped from the conversation, right? So there's goals of achieving equity, mental health, wellness of students. There are a lot of aspects in the deleveling. I think that aspect has been avoided in this conversation. And these competing interests are important to discuss and not to brush away. And this discussion should be held, but it's on the educational leaders to figure out what the path forward they think is best. School committee is not the professional experts, are not professional experts in this realm. And I think our role as a school committee would be to sort of mitigate some of the community needs and have a dialogue with educators, seeing what they need to address some of these needs, which the community is bringing forward, and work. That's our job, to work in actually bringing or gathering the resources to be able to deliver these solutions, to be able to mitigate some of these shortcomings which are foreseen by the community. So I think it's a lot of dialogue, and I think the school committee cannot replace itself instead of the.
Sorry, let's really go to the beep if we can. Akiva, could you finish this?
Okay, I was getting some feedback on which one to do. I'll do the beep.
Oh,
I
so
just-
I was just finishing the sentence. I think it's upon us to gather the resources, allowing the educators to address some of these concerns, not to replace the professional experts in their area of expertise.
Thank you. Donna.
Thanks, Carrie. I really appreciate this question. I actually also want to say that I appreciate that Learning First Brookline has formed around this issue and has become so active, because I firmly believe as a parent myself, but that parents and students should have a voice in the educational experience in our district. The primary driver of everything academic this district does should be delivering excellent education to every student. I don't think that's anything we should be apologizing for. I think decisions need to be made based on best practices, data, clear goals, and demonstrated impact. My personal belief is that WISP is an experiment that has continued in the absence of some of these things. One BHS student in a recent article said, quote, "Putting everyone in the same class may make racial disparities harder to see, but it doesn't help students succeed at the next level." So in terms of what I would do, I would encourage more open bi-directional conversations on deleveling. I hope there would be conversations both at subcommittee meetings, specifically at curriculum, and then even beyond subcommittee and school committee meetings. There's no reason we can't have community forums where educators, students, stakeholders, parents are invited to share their thoughts and experiences, and the school committee listens to some of that. I also am really fascinated by that little tidbit that you incorporated into your question about how, the de-leveled classes are presumably being sort of pushed harder than other classes, and wonder why that wasn't explored in the original impetus for the de-leveling. So meaning, why weren't we looking at that part of the process, as to why kids were ending up in these disproportionate levels?
Thank you. Bob.
Okay, this is a big topic for me. There's no data in Brookline and mainly beyond that says that de-leveling helps the kids that it's designed to help. Part of me says it's insulting to the Black and brown kids that that's what we're talking about. raising their achievement levels. I think it's insulting to say to them, they have to be in a non-leveled class to reach an achievement level that a lot of kids have reached throughout our history here. And so I have a few stories. Um, I used to go out on the road show when I was the head of the high school. I used to go out to every elementary school and talk about the high school, tell them that I wanted 100% market share at Brookline High, and this is why I want 100% market share, because I think Brookline High is the best choice, knowing full well that some parents had the resources to send their kids to private schools, and I respect that as well. So again, I did that for 20 something years. And at the end of each of those meetings for 20 years, parents would come over to me and say, thank God for Brookline High. Thank God for the honors classes. Thank God for the AP classes. I am so excited to send my kids to Brookline High for that very powerful academic culture that you've established. And I think that that's part of a much broader understanding of educational equity. Educational equity is not about some kids. Educational equity is about all kids. We're responsible for all kids in our public schools. And I don't know how much time I have left, but
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
so I was up at about 1:30 in the morning with my son when he was at Brookline High, doing his notes for Debbie Quitt's AP US history class. And I told him, I said, David, you're up so late every night doing all these, intense courses. And now you're signing up for 5 AP classes in your senior year. Why? And he said to me, Dad, you don't understand. When I'm in these classes, I'm with my peers, we inspire each other, we have amazing conversations. That to me that's the education I want.
Thanks. Helen.
So my philosophy is that parents and students, with the advice of their counselors or their teachers, should be able to choose whatever level, and whatever class they want to take. When I first came on the school committee, many of you don't remember, but there was a test to get into advanced math, honors or AP. And both Frank Smizek and I worked on school committee policy that changed that it was up to parents to determine where the kids would go. They could take advice, but that test, and they would have the test as some knowledge based, but not as a decision maker. The same is true with all the WISP when it was first presented as a pilot. I was there at the curriculum subcommittee. I figured pilot, parents are still choosing what they want their kids to take. Then the pandemic happened and WISP sort of continued on without the school committee really realizing that it had continued and that there wasn't any real look. Because at the time, I asked for data. I asked them to report back. In the meantime, I've tried to work, Kevin Lang talked to me about a graduate student who is interested in really looking at what we've done, but the kids now we have 4 years of data on the WISP. Let's see what it did one way or the other. We already have that information. Also, I just think that in general, I want people to vote with their feet and be able to take whatever course they and their parents feel that they're qualified for. We do find oftentimes kids may sign up for AP or for honors and then drop down in the beginning. That happens a lot. But at least they're trying to do whatever they feel is correct. And I think we as a school committee need to encourage that.
Perfect timing. Okay, the AP question. Brookline High School.
Sorry, I didn't answer, Carrie.
Oh, yikes, Val, I'm so sorry. Yes, Val, thank you.
Thanks. So I did vote against de-leveling. I think anybody who's been paying attention to this knows I voted against de-leveling. I think it's important for us to have those options for students. I don't think that the data was there that faculty at the high school were suggesting that students of color, students with disabilities were doing better in 10th grade than if they had been in a leveled course. I also think that we need to look at our middle school programming. A lot of the argument for why we had, or why they were putting forward the pilot and the de-leveling was to put 9th graders on equal footing because they were getting kids in honors or in a whatever level it was who weren't all coming with the same knowledge and information. So I think we do need to look at a middle school model to really strengthen our middle school education and to have some leveling begin a little bit earlier so that we know where students are earlier and can help them get the education that's best for them as they approach high school. So I don't know how much time I have, but there's a great article in the Globe by someone perhaps on this Zoom about Newton, who, where they had a lot of de-leveling, and educators had concerns about being able to teach appropriately. And in Dighton Rehoboth, down close to where I grew up, they actually now have more leveling because with COVID, they were finding that it was easier for them to help kids at all levels if they had a smaller gap between those levels. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So sorry, I was jumping the gun to the AP question. So here it is. Brookline High School does not offer any AP English courses, even though over 70 students take the English AP exam each year. Students who want to prep for the exam have to either do it after school or by private means. The AP access issue at BHS is bigger than just no AP English. BHS offers no AP courses or almost no AP courses before junior year and tends to overload APs in senior year. And furthermore, some popular AP classes are by lottery only, including basic STEM classes like AP chemistry. What are your views on this topic? How would you work with the BHS administration to achieve those goals? Donna.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, this is interfering with my dog's dinner time. So he's very loud in the background. I apologize.
Can't hear him.
So again, I think this is another excellent question. And I think, parents and students want APs because they want rigor. And because the educational system in the US demands it at top tier colleges. And while top tier colleges might not be for everyone, I think it is for some, and that's important. And we should not be apologizing for that. And we should not be ashamed to provide that for students. I also want to say that in many cases, AP courses offer students not just academic rigor, but the opportunity to earn college credit in high school. For families like mine, I'm a single mom, we're on a limited income, that can have a meaningful impact on college affordability. So that point also shouldn't be sort of underscored. There's been some progress from what I understand with the chair of the English department at BHS, who specifically in English would be interested in pursuing AP English. Similar to what I said in the last question, I'd love to see more open, bi-directional conversations on the topic of AP access and AP support. I think we can learn a lot by talking to our students and talking to our educators and talking to our parents and our school committee members all in one room outside of public comment and outside of a school committee meeting to understand what people are actually asking for and how we could support them. I think that I know I only have a few seconds left, but I'll say collaboration is incredibly important. I have met with various deputy superintendents, various school committee members on a lot of different issues over the past decade. And conversation, real honest conversation goes a long way.
Thank you. Bob.
We need to unmute him.
Oh, hang on.
Tal, do you have the three little
Yeah.
dots in the right?
How did that happen?
I think, oh, there we go.
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you. So what many of you probably don't know is that I was a trustee of the college board for 6 years. I'm very, very familiar with the AP world. And in fact, when I was a trustee of the college board, one of the things I did that I'm proud of was I encouraged them to have a writing test because I felt like I felt that the writing samples that that the kids submitted to colleges sometimes had a lot of help. And I felt like if the college board would have a writing sample, take a half an hour, 45 minutes to do a writing sample, you get a legitimate understanding of how well the kids do write. Anyway, so I've always had a deep commitment to AP. I know that organization well, and I'm actually proud of the work that they continue to do to reform themselves and get better and better. Okay, so one thing that people don't know is that we never had an AP English class at Brookline High. And I was always very, very proud of the English department at Brookline High School. Nobody, when I was there, nobody ever asked for AP English, but I'm not opposed to it. If people want, because there are reasons to have AP credit, of course. So I wouldn't be opposed to having an AP English class or two at the high school. One of the things that I'm very proud of still is that we took away the barriers to getting into AP classes when I was at the high school. So here's quick data. We took away the barriers. We used to have 47, 48 kids in US history AP. The average AP score on the test was about 4.2. We opened it up. A couple of years later, there were 125 kids, not 47 kids. The average AP score, 4.3. I talked to Anthony Meyer the other day. There's 151 kids right now in AP US history. So I'm very supportive of AP. I want as many kids as possible to be there. And by the way, there's more kids of color in AP as we expanded it.
Interesting. Helen.
So I actually was interesting your question. I think I'm in favor of having AP. I see, we should have as many AP classes as we can. I actually called today to find out how many, are there kids being kept out of AP classes? And my understanding is there are none. There is 6 sections of AP chemistry for next year and 4 sections of computer science AP, in addition to all the other ones that we have. I think, the only limitation right now is our budget and being able to have enough teachers to be able to teach these courses more than anything else. We've unfortunately had to do cuts because of our budget, our structural deficit, and it comes from all classes, but certainly AP is one of them too. I don't think there should be any limitations except kids, and I think we do. We tend to. Well, yeah, I guess it's the answer to your question.
You have another 50 seconds, but if that's okay.
I'll see
Val.
that.
Okay, Val.
Thank you. I very much support AP classes, particularly AP English being added. I think that our current offerings disadvantage kids who are perhaps humanities kids like I was. And it's not that we have too many STEM, because we only offer about 50% of the available APs in Brookline. On what Bob said about our English classes, I mean, the good news about our English classes at BHS currently is that they're pretty rigorous. So by the time that our kids are juniors and seniors, those who decide to take the AP exam do really well. So for example, 95% of the kids in Brookline who take the AP English exams, the 2 exams, have a score of 3 or better. That exceeds Wellesley, that exceeds Newton, that exceeds Cambridge, and that exceeds Boston by a lot. So we're teaching students well, but in terms of percentage of our students who take the test, that's where we fall behind. So that's where I think that having the specific class is really helpful for those students who want to do that. So you can travel the path that fits you better, whether it's the actual AP course that's labeled that you get credit for, and that leads you to the exam, or whether you decide to take one of our other fantastic English classes and do prep for the exam after. I think it's incredibly important. I do think that we really need to look at why it is that we're not expanding access for some of our younger students, our 10th and 11th graders. I think that there's a little bit of bias in there in terms of putting barriers and prerequisites in that might not be necessary. And it disadvantages our kids as they're applying to college. So just as we have to look at the piece about affordability of college, so too for admission to college. Thanks.
Thank you. Akiva.
So, I mean, we all agree that we want to maximize every student's potential, and that's been talked about before. What we tend to forget and not talk about, that there's also students that need extra help and extra support to achieve their needs and their goals. And there's always a fine balance. And I think it's upon the regulator or the governing body, which is the school committee, in a sense, to be with a hand, finger on the pulse and make sure that this balance is achieved. That is, not get into the particular mechanisms which the educators apply to achieve these goals, but rather have the broad overview and make sure this balance is achieved. So, and in a budget constrained environment, obviously there's always trade-offs, right? So if we're talking about more AP classes, it may mean less support. On the other hand, I mean, there's one blanket which is pulled in many different directions. So therefore, the input from the educators and the educational administration is crucial to be able to make decisions. And I think it's on them and it's on the school committee to provide the support they need. One other aspect I think that's also lost in this discussion is that educational excellence is not only the narrow prism of academic achievements. And in the last SWS graduation, the graduating class gave their 3-year reward to the custodian of the school. And to me, that's also that's emblazonation of educational excellence. There's no metric in academic achievements that will be able to measure that, but that is a product of excellent education where these classes have gone through 4 years. So I think it's important to combine all these factors in, and our educators are there. They see what's happening, and I think this conversation has to be done through them.
Thank you. Okay, question about middle school. Brookline used to offer, at least for math, the option for some middle schoolers to accelerate, skip a grade, or even test into BHS math. Those options, along with other enrichment options, have disappeared through the years. Brookline has done well in middle school in terms of supporting students who need extra support through initiatives such as WIN and the learning centers. But there are currently no options for students who could use extra challenges. Students of means can get them through programs such as the Russian School of Math, while others get left behind. What are your thoughts on reintroducing extra challenges into middle school curriculum? Bob.
Thank you, Terry. Again, that's a pretty easy question for me. As I said, we have to expand our understanding of educational equity. I think it's been narrowed, and I think we can expand that. One of the concrete examples that I would offer to you, Carrie, would be the calculus project right now, which, by the way, launches historically underachieving kids into high-level mathematics, and we have data that shows that it works and it's powerful. And so I would propose that the calculus project, for example, be launched in grade 4. Adrian Mims, who's the founder of the Calculus Project, who now is the CEO of the National Calculus Project, he said we can go lower than 4th grade. But again, fiscally, I think that would be tougher. I also wouldn't limit the kind of support that the Calculus Project provides to mathematics. I would be in favor of power literacy, for example, also starting in the 4th grade. That would really inspire and challenge kids who were, I always used to say some kids are ready, and some kids don't come to school ready for reading Fun with Dick and Jane. That was the basic readings that I did when I grew up. And some come ready to read Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. And so we have to take care of the kids who are reading Fun with Dick and Jane, and we have to take care of the kids who are reading Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Educational equity is about meeting the needs as best we can of all the kids in the school system. And that means challenging them down in the lower levels as well as the AP and honors classes at the high school.
Great. Helen.
So I agree we should be challenging all kids to the best of their ability and making sure they're getting what they need. I think, one of the parts of the question is the K through 8 model. And there are some trade-offs with a K through 8 model. One of the advantages that I see, children don't do well with transitions. And so being able to be in the same school pre-K through 8, you really have very few transitions because we do have pre-K in most of our schools, or will eventually. Um, and and that's really important. You don't act out as an adolescent when you have your kindergarten teacher there. It's just not as likely. And you don't have raging hormones, all together in one building. So I see an immense advantage to having a K through 8 system, pre-K through 8 system. I mean, I see it with my kids and their relationships with their friends that are from elementary school. That being said, the issue of what do you do in middle school when some kids are more advanced. And we did used to have some of those courses that kids could take, especially at the Ridley School. And it works, but we have to be very careful with it because it can end up tracking kids because of the way scheduling happens in a smaller school, especially. So if you end up having, one class that's the advanced class and one class that's not, it becomes very evident very quickly. One of the ways we used to do it also was to have kids do something after school or first period type of thing to be able to take a class at the high school. Today, it would be an easier thing to do with Zoom and all that than it was back then. And so I think we should look at all options and see what's possible in challenging all kids.
Val. Wow,
Thanks.
perfect timing, Val. Yeah.
I started talking about this a little bit earlier, but I do think that we need to look at the K-8 model. I think that middle school is hard, and we need to acknowledge that it's hard. And so those social and emotional supports are important. But I think so too are building relationships with that cohort of students by age. So I do think that we need to look hard as a school committee and as a town at whether this K-8 model really works academically and socially, quite frankly, in the long term for our kids. I started, my earlier answer, I talked about ways in which I think we can challenge students in 7th and 8th grade in particular with more advanced math if that's what they are interested in or doing well in. And if you have a middle school, you have a bigger pool with which to differentiate education. And so that's part of why I think that looking again at this middle school model really makes sense. In terms of the ECS, it's unfortunate that we lost ECS around the pandemic. My kids loved, for instance, the 3D printing and 3D modeling that happened at Driscoll. The project-based learning and the universal summer program that happened for all students who wanted to participate at Ridley during their reopening phase after COVID. Those types of opportunities are really key for kids to be able to try things out and try things on. So I would love to bring all of that back into a middle school model.
Thank you. Akiva.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we all agree that education is not cookie cutter and it's not one size fits all. And I'm all for this ability or attempt to individualize. I think we need to give back some of the power, initiative, thinking to the principals and teachers and have them think how within their frameworks they can actually provide this challenge and opportunities for development and growth for their students. That's what education is about. And once again, it's not that we should be mandating from the outside any particular mechanism, because I mean we can think about whatever ideas we have. If the educational staff is not on board, there's no one that's going to carry it out. So they have to be engaged. It has to be something that comes from within their knowledge base and their experience. And I'd also want to provide an environment where they can come forward with their initiatives and their ideas, right? Not all schools need to be the same and not all classes are the same. And we really want to allow and have teachers be able to have an impact on the education of students. And for that, they need to have some kind of freedom of action within the boundaries that they have.
Donna.
You can hear me, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. So the cutting down and eventual elimination of enrichment and challenge support is an enormous problem. It came out of a budget decision at school committee. I think it illustrates exactly the type of thing that parents and students are referring to when they talk about concerns in our district about wanting to refocus on educational excellence. Again, I sound like a broken record, but a substantive discussion on data and best practices on the issue of middle schools and the value of enrichment and challenge support and differentiation would be incredibly valuable. I also wonder if it might tie into some of the behaviors some of us are seeing in the middle schools and have experienced with our kids, and potentially some of the issues, right, that we're trying to address with de-leveling in 9th grade. I also want to take a minute and say that I think the lack of differentiation and the move away from enrichment and challenge support might have something to do with the movement towards project-based learning in our middle schools, and the move away from more traditional sort of, or what's considered traditional direct instruction, where teachers are leading structured lessons to convey like very foundational knowledge. Direct instruction often facilitates differentiation. It allows educators to more easily tailor content and pacing. I would be interested in understanding how all of those points connect to one another. And again, I think these instructional choices significantly impact curriculum, and the conversations belong in the curriculum subcommittee.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, I got distracted because now I'm getting ready for the lightning round. So I just want to remind the audience, you can post questions in the chat. And if you want to be anonymous, you can select send to host only with your question or your comment. Okay. Deep breath, everybody. For those of you who are early birds like me, it's a little challenging at the moment, so I'm going to try to really pump it up. With this lightning round, these questions are all on the budget. You will get just 30 seconds or less. We tried to formulate them so that they would be, they would lend themselves to very short answers. So here we go. We will start with Bob. We're going to keep going in the same order. The timer will do 30 seconds. Question. Let's pretend you get $1 million to add back into the budget. Would you bring back any of the cut programs or something completely new? And if so, what would it be? Bob.
$1 million? It's not that much money. It's 10 full-time teachers. Okay, here are some of my priorities. I would invest in the calculus project and power literacy in the elementary schools, in the lower grades. I would actually bring back Teachers as Scholars, which is a program, it's an amazing professional development program that's now being run by Mary Birchinall, former English teacher and head of the English department. It's an amazing professional development program, and also smaller class sizes.
Wow, you did it. 30 seconds. Helen, $1 million. How do you spend it?
So it would depend, first of all, if it was one-time money or forever money. Assuming it's forever money, because you get one-time money, you can't do all the things that you want to do. But let's say, assuming it's forever, I would bring back the K-5 world language program in a much more intensive and better way. I think that's something that the Brookline voters voted for in an override, and I think it's something that is really important in our world today for kids to know more than one language.
Beautiful. Yeah, good. 30 seconds. Val. $1 million. What do you do?
Thanks. So we still have a gap right now. So first and foremost, I'd probably use it to close our gap. But if in this miracle world we closed our gap, I would hire 10 new teachers to teach AP classes that we've been talking about.
Great. Akiva, $1 million.
Before spending, I would try to talk with educators, parents, groups which are less heard, and get their insight. Not that that will definitely make the decision. And I would prioritize. And within those priorities, I would also like to bring back the functions that were cut off with the Office of Inclusion and Equity, not necessarily in that specific format, but think how we can supplement those actions.
Great. Great. Donna, $1 million.
All right, bullet points. I would bring back the vice principal that was cut. I would also see if we need vice principals in some of our schools, AKA peers. Enrichment, for sure. Evidence-based literacy tutoring for students in the younger grades. Extra funding for child study teams, which would potentially affect the pipeline into special education and reduce that. Small class sizes. Did I already say enrichment? And more tutoring if we need it.
Great. Okay, next question. The idea of quarterly town school partnership reviews of the budget has been floated by some of the select board candidates. What are your thoughts on that idea? Helen.
This is a complicated one. I've been on the school committee for a long time. The school committee and the superintendent, with the deputy superintendent of administration and finance, take care of the school budget. We used to get quarterly reports that were very clear. It was where our budget was. We used to get very clear quarterly reports on our special education budget, and that we have not gotten that in the same way in the last few years. And that has to do with turnover and people not being part of that. I'm
Sorry, 30 seconds is short for that, something that complex.
It's a long question. It's not a short answer.
Val.
Thanks. So I've said this in other forums. I support this idea. It came out of BFAC, so that the school committee, the select board, and the advisory committee would meet 4 times a year and go over the budget. I think it's a great idea. I think that it helps us to do long-term planning and to get a sense of not just where the schools are, but also where the town is, so that we can coordinate our budgets and understand the numbers.
Thank you. Akiva.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, overseeing such a large budget, I don't know how people know this. The education budget is approximately 40% of the town budget, so it's always a good idea to have these joint ventures. I think it also works both ways. I mean, that would be a mechanism by which, for example, school committee can note out to town that the investment in education percentage-wise has been decreasing over the past 5 years. So it works both ways.
Great. Donna.
So the school department is obviously struggling. And so I would welcome the collaboration with our partners on the town side. I think I see the town and school finances more holistically. And so I am open to anything that would help us achieve success and participate in a system of checks and balances.
Great. Bob.
Yeah, I think this whole topic is up for discussion because of the fact that we don't have our fiscal house in order and haven't had our fiscal house in order for a while. I look forward to being engaged in more fiscal strategic planning, creative fiscal planning, and I agree with what everybody else said in terms of the relationship with the town side in terms of the budget. But I think the school committee has to really work hard to put its house in order because that's a big problem right now.
Great. Next question. Do you consider the current budget sufficiently transparent, and why or why not? Val.
Thank you. So I think that we could do with more dashboards so that you can actually see the inputs behind some of the numbers, and to see that in real time, again, over the course of the year. We don't see a draft budget until really February in any form, and I think that's having a real-time dashboard like Brockton had showed us would be one idea of how to have greater transparency.
Great. Akiva.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, I'd have to say, have I attempted to get all the data? And so that's what when you claim for transparency, you need to ask whether you were actually asking the right people and the right parts of the organization for that data. So transparency is always something that should be worked on and should be improved, and I think it's ongoing goal.
Okay, Donna.
No, I believe very firmly we do not have transparency into the budget. We would really benefit from having real-time dashboards like Open Architect. And actually this conversation came up today at Town School Partnership where members of the town specifically asked to see inputs because they pointed out things weren't transparent. So I think we would all benefit from that, including the school committee members themselves.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah. So for about 20 years, I presented the annual Brookline High School budget to Peter Rowe, who said, Bob, you do something I call Weintraub math with your budget. But Weintraub math always worked. And I have a lot of experience in presenting a very transparent budget. The system's budget is obviously larger than the high school budget, but I bring tremendous experience with fiscal planning and fiscal transparency. 21st Century Fund, we had a 10 million. Okay.
Thanks. Helen.
So I do think we need to be more transparent. A dashboard would be great. I think the problem is we just got through cutting our data analyst, and so who's going to be doing these things? That's where our problem is. There's, the budget, for the most part, when there isn't a structural deficit, we're able to keep our budget transparent and out there, and people are able to do the work. And without having the backroom staff that we've had to cut, it's really quite difficult on those who remain.
Thank you. Okay, we have about 3 more questions in this lightning round, and then we go to the audience questions. Here's the next one. Occasionally, the public schools of Brookline have access to one-time funds, meaning they're only insured for one budget year. Do you think there should be any limits on the use of such funds? And if so, why or what limits? Akiva.
So, I mean, like in any budget, a one-time fund should be allocated for endeavors or projects or things that are not continuous, right? Because otherwise you build this dependency and then it gets ingrained into the budget. And I think there's more than enough initiatives out there that educators have that are project-based opportunities. And I think the one-time allocations are appropriate for that use.
Thank you. Donna.
So using one-time funds is not a sustainable practice. I believe there's a policy that states one-time funds shouldn't be used unless there is an available source for sustaining the program or salary. So I think some of this will also come up in the upcoming audit review or the results of the financial review. So I am not a fan of using one-time funds for anything that's not sustainable.
Bob.
Yeah, I like one-time funds. You buy stuff, you buy materials, you invest in professional development for 1 year. So, you don't invest in something that's going to go beyond the 1 year, but I love to have one-time funds. Yeah. I mean, you can buy t-shirts for your faculty that says United Mine Workers of Brookline High School.
Someone's getting punchy. Helen.
Yeah, one-time funds should be for one-time purposes. However, we should be aware that, the Innovation Fund, for instance, this is something that I've always encouraged. They come up with, teachers come up with wonderful ideas for new courses, new opportunities. Oftentimes in the past, they would have 2 teachers for a course. And I would say very clearly, we can't afford that. We can afford a new course if kids vote with their feet and go to that course, but we can't otherwise. So I think one-time funds should be used for one time, just like I said with the $1 million.
Val.
Thanks. I think we're seeing what happens with one-time funds, and this isn't just in Brookline. The ESSER funds, so the COVID relief funds, were used for a few years and largely created positions, social work positions, other positions, to assist during the pandemic and in the aftermath of the pandemic. And we're seeing now what cliffs we're approaching because of the one-time funds. So I don't think without a recurring revenue source that we should be using one-time funds for recurring expenses.
Okay. Follow-up question. Local groups have raised funds to partially restore the Office of Educational Equity, which the school committee had voted to eliminate. Now there's a petition asking the school committee to accept a couple of $100,000 for that purpose. If and when that comes before the school committee, how would you vote? Donna?
How would I vote about receiving that
Mhm.
grant money? I would vote against it.
Bob?
Well, that's an interesting question. You're making it specific. The 21st Century Fund used private money to do innovation. It continues to do that. So to me, the question is, what do you want? What are your values in terms of what you want to spend the money on? So, for many, many years, continuing today, we accept private money for the innovation fund, and we provide really interesting opportunities for kids and teachers to do that. So that's a conversation that we'd have to have with this proposal.
Helen?
I actually agree with Bob on that one. I think that it's complicated. We need to know it's not one-time funds, because that, certainly wouldn't, and how it would be funded in the future. And I'm not clear that there is a pathway.
Val?
My understanding from conversation with the petitioners is that it is a one-time fund and that they'd look to utilize potentially the METCO grant, and I oppose using the METCO grant for this purpose, so I would not vote to accept the money.
Akiva?
Yeah, I mean, so that this is a cut that was done under duress. So I'm sort of on the fence here, because I think, I mean, in principle, I don't think these functions should be coming from private or non governmental money. If we were to go forward with this, I'd want to see a contingency plan on what happens in the next year.
Thank you. Okay, this question is a bit more complex, so 1 minute or less if you could do it, please. There have been several missteps taken by this administration at the central office, some costing the public schools of Brookline hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal settlements, some causing significant budget issues, some resulting in community anger and distress, and some causing a substantial crisis of trust. Do you think there has been sufficient accountability on the part of the central administration in each such case? Or more specifically, in light of today's announcement, looking towards future superintendents, how could the school committee do better on this front? Bob?
There has not been enough accountability. It has dramatically undermined trust, particularly in the fiscal management of our school system. And it's one of the things that the next school committee has a tremendous responsibility to correct. And that begins with a new superintendent, and that begins with an overall view of what the central office does and how well it does it. Our job as a school committee is to hire, supervise, and evaluate the superintendent. That's a big job. It incorporates the entire central office and how that's functioning. And I would take that responsibility and that role very seriously. I've done a lot of supervision, done a lot of evaluation. That's the pathway to improving the disasters that we've experienced. Thanks.
Thank you. Helen?
Can you repeat the question, because I'm not clear exactly what you're asking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, but basically there have been a bunch of missteps, right? Some cost a lot of money, some cost community trust. Has there been enough accountability on the part of the central administration? And looking towards future superintendents, how could this school committee do better on this front?
Well, one of the things that really concerns me is the special education budget and how it grew $9 million from last year to this year. And that, I think, is something that we have to look at. I think that's what you're talking about with the settlements. we were told there were 66 kids in out-of-district placements, and then come to find out there's actually 86. So we're starting to get to some of that, and it's a long slog to get through it. It's not, I mean, this is a big organization, and there's a lot of different pieces. I think that we need to make sure that we as a school committee get the information quickly and understand it. We have not gotten it, that's true. And part of it, we actually had no reports for 3 years from special ed in terms of numbers of students, in terms of their costs, the numbers of paraprofessionals. I've asked for that and never got that.
Thank you. Val.
Thanks. There's a level of chaos that's been apparent on the 5th floor for the last while. We have 2 of our school committee hires are now vacant. So the deputy superintendent of OSS and the superintendent will be for July 1. And those are 2 critical hires, I think. And this, the audit, so the deputy superintendent of OSS went out and I think, really laid bare some issues for us to look at, both from a fiscal management perspective, a management practices perspective, but also from a culture perspective and a collaboration perspective of how people are working together between all the deputies, the superintendent, and the school committee. So I do think we have a reset, and we need to do that reset with the community to regain that trust. And I hope that the audit is a piece of that.
Thank you. Akiva.
Yeah, I have to admit that I'm a bit at unease with the framing of this question, because it implies that there's finger pointing here, and I think it's not non-constructive blaming. I think we need, and this is emblematic of the problem the problems we're dealing with. I mean, we need to create a completely different culture, which is void of these adversarial relationships and tensions. And I think it takes a lot of work. And I think the first step is trying to think of how we frame these issues. And I think they need to be reframed in a constructive way that we can go forward in looking forward and building something that's sustainable.
Thank you. Ghana.
Thanks, Carrie. I do think this is a good question. Right now, the public is looking for a school committee that asks more questions and gets more answers, works with greater intention. I think we all value our schools deeply, but there are clear frustrations that we need to address. I also think we need to refocus the role of the school committee away from the narrative that school committee's role is to support the administration. I think the school committee needs to freely admit when it makes mistakes. Making mistakes is part of learning, but I think it's also an important part of trust building. And I think we need to recommit to the fiduciary responsibility of students first and foremost. And there is a lot of work that lies ahead in terms of rebuilding trust.
Thank you. So it's 8:43. Candidates, thank you so much. Hang in there. We have just a few more minutes. We're going to shift now to audience questions. Let's try to keep them to 30 seconds, but you can go a bit over if you want. And we've got till 9 o'clock if you guys have the stamina. Thank you. So first question from the audience. How can we fund increases to middle school programs? Let's keep going. Let's see. I'm going to just keep repeating this order. Bob, could you go first, please?
What's that question?
So how can we fund increases? How can we fund increases to middle school programs?
Well, that's a holistic budget issue. You have to step back from the entire budget and, examine what you want, what you need, what you can do without. It's just it's a holistic budget question, and what your priorities are, and middle school, lower elementary school, high school. I think that's a interesting question to try to answer. Again, I'll say it one more time. I won't say it one more time.
Helen.
Well, I think we need to look at ways to enhance the middle school program in general. part of it is a longer school day, and that requires, renegotiating contracts with the union too. But we have the shortest middle school day. I think if we had a longer day, we could do more during that time. I think there's also after school activities that we could fund better and include and expand on. I think we do a great job with our extended days, being able to do some of that earlier on in some of the school programs. You said we could go a little longer, but I think that we could also look at our sports and our other STEM activities, our maker spaces to look for ideas.
Great. Val.
I guess this is the third time I've said it tonight, but I think we need to look hard at the K-8 model because there are some inefficiencies in that model. And so if we want to enhance the middle school experience, I think we need to look hard at whether having a separate middle school system will work in the long term. You can sort of streamline on administration. You don't have to have all of the same capital pieces in the same building. And you can really then focus that education on what middle school students need.
Great. Akiva.
Yeah, so I'll just second what Bob said. I mean, we have to reevaluate the whole budget and reprioritize. I mean, that's a question of priorities in the budget. So I think I don't think there's any straightforward answer. I would also look for out of the box opportunities. I mean, there's a wealth of higher education institutions around us. Think about partnering with some of their programs to provide some extra content in our schools and all. I mean, you need to think creatively.
Thank you. Donna.
So, realistically, at this point, there's only two ways to increase funding. One is going to be an operating override, which we have a public trust factor right now, so I'm not sure that that's very viable in the near term. The other is to start reducing costs or potentially increase revenues other ways. There are some ideas that were floated around. I do think we have not done our due diligence as a community or as a school community, I should say, sort of going through our budget with a fine-tooth comb and rebuilding it so that it is a reflection of our educational values and priorities.
Great, thank you. Okay, this one will be 45 seconds. 3 school committee members wrote a letter to the Brookline News today saying that the superintendent's departure, quote, is the latest in a long and troubling list of departures of educator leaders of color, end quote, over the past decade. And this, quote, failure to retain reflects poorly on Brookline and impacts the public schools of Brookline's ability to attract educator leaders of color now and in the future, end quote. Do you agree that the superintendent's departure is due to a specific failure in attracting and retaining educators of color? Helen.
This is a complicated question. It's not a simple one at all. I think there is an issue in terms of retaining educators of color. I mean, I think but I think what the actual article talked about is what do we do for the future to continue to try and maintain it. We do have affinity groups that work, I think, quite well for educators of color but it's not true so much for the administrative staff. And I think that's where you're talking about more the issue. Also, when we have to do cuts and riffing, usually it's the teachers who are newly hired who end up getting, the pink slip, and that's a problem too. So it's multi-determinate, and it needs to be looked at.
Okay, Val.
So how to say this tactfully? I wasn't asked to sign the letter today, and I'm not a signatory to the letter, so I'll leave it there.
Okay, Akiva.
So I think what the letter is talking about is there's an environment, a culture which is we're unable to retain anyone, and it's become an environment where people are not do not feel welcome, do not feel belonging, and that obviously will reflect on retention, and performance. And I think this problem is further exacerbated when dealing with people who, when there may be some power or other imbalances, such as in the issues the writers wrote, which make this problem even more severe. So I mean, I think I commended the writers of the letter. I think it's an important problem we need to tackle.
Donna.
Look, we've had two permanent superintendents resign. One was white, one was black. I really don't think specifically the issue of superintendent resignation has to do with race in this case. I think it has to do with accountability, evaluation, hiring. Did we hire the right person? Experience. So I think that's a distraction from some of the conversations we should be having.
Bob.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a list of people of color that I've hired who've come to Brookline and who've stayed here for many years and established an amazingly powerful reputation. Dr. Adrian Mims, 20 years. Dr. Piper Smith Mumford, probably 25, 28 years. James Cradle, 40 years. Tony Cradle, 40 years. Jackie Brown, 25 years. Janae Utaro, 20 years. Gretchen Underwood, 40 years. Melanie Alexander, probably 20 years as well. Chris Vick, Clifton Jones. It's a long list of people who we hired, who stayed here, who felt supported. And I think, to write a letter saying that this is about race, I think that Martin Luther King said it's not about the color of your skin, it's about the quality of your work.
Thank you. Okay, next question. This is just a 30-second one. What is the ideal dynamic between parents and the school committee to best support students and the school community? Val.
I hope I understand the question.
Yeah.
There are a lot of views in school committee. I think that we need to get into the schools. This has been a struggle for school committees to be able to actually get into school buildings and have conversations with families. And I think that communication, that bidirectional communication is critical as we then make funding decisions and policy decisions in our school committee role.
Akiva.
So I mean, yeah, school committee should have conversations and dialogue with parents, but I feel strongly that anything that pertains to support of the students themselves or interaction with the students and the curriculum be done through the professional educators. So I think there needs to be thought in how this conversation is held, at what levels, and with whom.
Thank you. Donna.
So I told the story the other day at an event Val and I were at, but I have a very vivid memory of my first school committee meeting that I watched. It was 9 years ago. The Lawrence school community was going through a really difficult period. I tuned in, I listened to the superintendents and school committee engage in a conversation about like the chipper mood at Lawrence. And I was really floored by how little that exchange resembled the reality we were experiencing. So I believe that the relationship should be based in reality, in respect, in collaboration, and in communication.
Thank you. Bob.
Yeah, I'll go back to my work in the Lowell Public Schools, where I founded the City Micro Society Magnet School. And that school was a model of society that the kids participated in. And one of the governing structures was called the Executive Council. The Executive Council consisted of students. There's a K-8 school. Students, parents, teachers, members of the community. That executive council became a model in Massachusetts for the school improvement councils that we all have today. And I'll say that in order to build relationships with the parent community, you need formal structures where that democratic participation happens on a regular basis.
Thank you. Helen.
I think there are a number of structures that are there right now. I find that I get most of my information from going to events, not necessarily a structured event, but listening to parents while we're at, the Steps to Success event or at other gatherings, whether it's a basketball game or on the soccer field. Those are places where you can really hear from people. I think what happens oftentimes we go to we're invited by PTOs to talk. I went to the Runkle PTO to talk about our structural deficit, and 5 people showed up. So you try and do the best you can. Sometimes you're successful, and sometimes less so.
Okay, I'm getting tired. Did everyone answer that one? I think
I
everyone
think so.
did. Okay, 5 more minutes left. I am going to indulge myself in a moderator's prerogative to ask my question, which is, as some of you know, I submitted a public records request for emails to and from the superintendent in hopes of understanding how he came to send out messaging after October 7th that raised such an outcry that he apologized for it 2 days later. 18 months and more than $900 in fees later, I still haven't gotten all of the relevant emails that I'm entitled to under the public records law. And I've heard from some school committee members that they couldn't even get the superintendent to respond to their queries about this. Do you consider this a problem, Akiva?
I mean the answer to the question about public information, that's you should be able to get the information if it's under the Public Information Act. You should have access to that. There's no question about that. I would question the notion that this issue needs to be interrogated, but that's your prerogative. I mean, I would argue against this attempt to oversee, but it's your prerogative.
Thank you. Donna.
Sorry, Carrie, is the question, is it a problem? Was that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a problem. Easy.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah. Steve Ehrenberg went public,
Mm-hmm.
said that he was having tremendous difficulty getting data, getting documents from the central office. It's a huge problem. As I said before, and as everybody knows, the responsibility of the school committee is to supervise and evaluate the superintendent of schools. So I talked to Steve a little bit and I said, I just don't understand that. You're the school committee, you're the supervisor, and you're not getting the data and you're not getting the documents. It's unacceptable.
Thank you. Helen?
Yes, you should be able to. It's the Freedom of Information Act, and you're entitled to get all of our as you'll all find out on the school committee, all of your writings are public and can be FOIA'd at any time.
Thank you. Val?
Yes, it's a big problem. Although I didn't go publicly like Stephen did, I was someone who followed up and didn't hear back from the superintendent on this and many other issues that I would put on repeat email and not get information on. So yes, it's a problem.
Thank you. So we have 2 minutes left. We could do one more question, or you could do closing statements. I think maybe really fast closing statements just to seal it all up. And let's start with Helen.
Oh, wait, was I the next one? I don't think
Wait,
so.
what are we doing? Let's do, 30 seconds, final words.
Well, I guess I really feel experience matters here, knowing the history, knowing what's happened in the past, because we have been here before. We've been in financial difficulties. We've had the issues at different times with superintendents and with trying to find new superintendents. And I think it's really important to have some sort of history, or if not, we're doomed to repeat it. And I think that, one has to remember that the school committee member is one of 9. There are 9 people who have to make a decision.
Thank you. Val?
I want to thank you for hosting this, Learning First Brookline. I think this was a really great way to get us on very specific topics that don't necessarily come up at other forums. And valfrias.com is my website for any general information. But I'm committed in this next term to really moving us forward with these 2 out of 3 school committee hires that we have in this coming year.
Thank you. Akiva.
So I'm an individual. I'm not running as part of any slate, and I'm really focused on evaluating every issue on a case-by-case basis. And as a member, I don't want to be held captive to the loudest voices in the room. I want to be able to bring those who are less heard and bring their voice into the room and to the decision making. Want to have an open environment of openness and good civic discourse.
Thank you.
So that's my main goals.
Great. Donna.
I want to express my gratitude, not just to the organizers, but also everybody who showed up and spent an hour and a half of their time here. You can learn more about my background, learn more about me at donnaforbrookline.com, DANNA for brookline.com. I will say that I really believe that we need decisive, transparent, thoughtful leadership in the school committee. I ask the right questions, hard questions, even when it's uncomfortable. I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo if it's not serving our students. And I really want to bring everything I'm learning from each of you with me onto the school committee.
Thank you. Bob.
Yeah. I've worked in the trenches of our public schools for 40 years, including 23 years in Brookline. I love Brookline. I love the Brookline Public Schools. I was proud to be a part of the Brookline Schools for all those years. And I'm running for school committee to end the revolving door of leadership. I'm running for school committee to get our fiscal house in order. And I'm also running for school committee to find our academic center of gravity. I find that the academic world is being politically pushed and not necessarily academically pushed. And I appreciate being here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So first, I want to apologize to anyone who put in questions that I didn't get a chance to ask. All of the candidates are incredibly accessible, and I'm sure that you can just send your question directly to them. And I want to really thank Devorah and Tal and the whole Learning First Brookline gang. And anyone who's not familiar with it, check it out. It's amazing. And to the candidates, especially, I just think the world of all of you. And the fact that you are willing to serve and to stay up until after 9 o'clock at night to do a panel like this just speaks to your dedication and your civic duty and civic service that you are willing to put into Brookline and the Brookline schools. So thank you to everybody, and vote. Right? Vote. You can vote already. So thank you to all the candidates for coming. Thank you very much. And take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night.
night.
Tal, do you want to turn it off? Tal,
Hey, Tal, can you end
I
it?
think you need to end it.
Yeah.
I think it's on you to end it.